So I've been playing Tekken 4. Back at it again with a review of another irrelevant fighter, it's ThorHighheels! When I said I was going to cover the fighting games that no one cares about, I wasn't just gonna stick to largely unknown games. Although I do have some cheeky shit planned. What I sometimes find even more interesting are the entries within very well-known series that are forgotten, underrated, or hated by the fanbase. You know, Metal Gear Acid, Final Fantasy, Crystal Chronicles, the Crystal Bearers, holy fucking shit that name Square Jesus Christ, the Street Fighter EX series, stuff like that. The ugly ducklings that are misunderstood, flawed, panned, too different, or maybe even a cheeky bit of a hidden gem. But for reasons often undocumented, not quite as popular at the time. And Tekken 4 is probably at least one of those things. Or, I hope so, at least. I mean that would make this intro seem a bit pointless. The story of Tekken 4e takes place after the events of Tekken 1, 2, and 3e. Basically, some douchebag, dickbag, rich guy family called the Mishimas hosts an annual fighting game tournament for big bucks. Only problem is that all members of this family are complete fucking assholes as they keep taking turns killing each other. Tekken 1 ends with Dad throwing Grandpa off of a cliff. Tekken 2 starts with Grandpa somehow surviving that and ends with him throwing Dad off of the cliff because revenge. In Tekken 3, the son wants in on the action and does something. And now, in Tekken 4, Dad is still alive somehow, edgy robot eye included, and is challenged to partake in this year's tournament by Grandpa, who is now so very fucking old that he's required to wear big bold man baby diapers. So much lore indeed. In any case, it's a fighting game plot and therefore entirely fucking impotent. But what it does offer is a colorful cast of characters, all of which carrying their own wee little sub-stories. And I quite like that. You see, I was never too fond of competitive gaming myself, so seeing a game built for that, still taking its time to add single-player content like story modes was always greatly appreciated, as it adds a lot more for the player to see and do. Even if it is just a bunch of static text and FMV cutscenes. As for the actual quality of the writing and voice acting, however, oh boy.
I never got to fight you at the tournament. I'll take you on right here, right now.
There's no reason to fight.
You ain't got one? Well, I do.
Okay, so it's not actually all that bad, as these characters tend to selectively speak their own language. Japanese girl speaks Japanese girl, Korean man speaks Korean man, except here, and so on. And all voice acting that isn't in English is actually pretty okay. This creates a rather funky discordance between the Resident Evil 1 tier bullshit and the almost sort of kind of anime production quality, which works really well. The more serious occulty undertones remain intact, and the are appropriately. But anyway, each story mode playthrough is bookended with a small setup, a few midpoint cutscenes, and an FMV near the end. Which I know isn't much, but back when it came out, it still wasn't much. Typically though, you'd either just get some unvoiced FMV or, in the worst of cases, nothing but a few blurbs in the manual. So the fact that Tekken 4 took some time out of its way to put in some extra effort made it speak just a bit more to my imagination. And I wasn't alone either, as despite its stupidity, the Tekken series' story is still one of the most celebrated fighting game lore horror extravaganzas out there. Plus, the satanic themages are still pretty bitching. I mean, check out this promotional art for Tekken 2. Either way, the characters are pretty well developed across all entries, and it could be considered a moderately entertaining tale of femfuckery. Incestuous. So it's a one-on-one fighter. You pick a dude, and then fight another dude one-on-one. There's 23 dudes to pick from, even boob dudes. And all of them have drastically different fighting styles and blah blah blah, you know how traditional fighting games work. You play through the arcade mode multiple times, unlock all of the secret characters, and I don't know, go over to a friend's house with your memory card to impress them or something. Now, you might think, but why did the fans not like this game then? Were they not impressed with your memory card? Well, reason being is that Tekken 4 changes the base gameplay essence at its core basically essentially. Instead of centering around relaying pressure to your opponent and tactfully taking turns pecking at each other looking for just the right opportunity to break their guard, it now has a focus on juggling and interactive stages above all else. Gone are the stiff but gleefully bulky and meaty vibes of Tekken 2 and especially 3, and in are floaty vibes, smoother movements, and physics that may or may not be a bit shit. And on top of that, some staple characters had their movesets or even entire fucking fighting styles altered completely, which never goes down well with the professional crowd. But on the other hand, it is easily one of the most accessible fighters I've ever played, and its ability to interact with the levels by smashing people into stuff or keeping them above ground for as long as possible was never not fun. Sometimes, though, certain stage hazards would get in the way of what I was doing, and I can see how that could make for less deliberate forms of play, but the bigger problem for the pros was that the game was slowed down considerably. Like in Tekken 2 and 3, it was common to jump and dash all over the place or end up on opposite sides running at each other. But in Tekken 4, that doesn't happen due to the size of the stages in question being slimmed down so there could be walls surrounding them on all sides. And to compensate for that, they made shit a tad slower, which is mostly noticeable while side or backstepping and especially while playing with characters known for rapid or elaborate combos. Jeez, I've been holding that in for fucking hours, man. Trying to do voiceover while feeling all gassy. Ooh. For the first time in ever, I actually did a wee bit of research as to why such a large group of people didn't like this game. And I gotta say, it was hard to find a very conclusive answer besides a few things that I already discussed. What I could glean though from various forum posts and my own cheeky revisits was that its precursor and its predecessor were leagues better both mechanically and kinesthetically. Tekken 4, as stated, feels a bit lighter and plays a tad slower, which fits its mood and the new aesthetic really well, but ultimately doesn't make for a very good fighting game, and besides that, two characters were also a bit OP, though the reasons as to why were all in technical fighter lingo and I have no idea what the fuck any of that means. And the wall bounce damage, while satisfying, makes stun locking way too much of a liability. If it feels unfair and spammy against a mindless AI, then I'd imagine it was a giant rusty pipe of the urethra for competitive people. And for what it's worth, even as a kid, I always remembered something being a bit off. Like, the other Tekkens were all games I could play for hours a day, but Tekken 4 was the game I thought very fondly of. But every time after having popped it in for 30 minutes, I realized I wasn't having all that much fun. And considering how much of a big deal the series was because of its second and third installments, I can see that very mild sensation of being hugely disappointing. Kinda similar to how the Wind Waker or Final Fantasy VIII compared to Ocarina of Time and Final Fantasy VII. Though that isn't to say that there aren't any good additions to the formula either. Plus, most of these issues aren't issues in a more single-player casual environment. Doing things like sidestepping, for instance, have never been this easy, thus greatly increasing your sense of freedom, and pulling off lengthier combos has become a lot less tricky as well, likely just due to the slower pace, but nevertheless, it is a very accessible fighting game because of these changes. The only downside, I guess, to the sidesteppier sidestepping is that it's now much harder to duck and punch.
Motherfucker just squats down and I'm trying to hit him, but the game's just all like, nah, bitch.
A sidestep used to be a quick double tap up or down and actually required a bit of skill to pull off, and only when pressed once would one do a jump or a duck. But here, I rarely managed to crouch down, let alone fucking propel myself upwards, because every time I tried to, I ended up politely stepping aside like a complete fucking spastic. Not great, innit, you dickhead?
Round chicken fight.
In regards to single-player content though, Tekken 4 also offers Tekken Force Mode, where no means yes. Force Mode uses the same control scheme for all of its fighters as it would do normally, but allows you to switch between locking onto dudes with L1 and R1. Reason being is that this is a 3D beat-em-up, where you get ravaged by goons who all line up for you to give them a good beating as you awkwardly navigate its linear corridor-like stages. It's fun, but entirely broken. Thing is that if you pick any character with big sweeping moves, you can clear a screen within seconds, mopping up all of these puppers in one fell swoop and collect all of the cheeky
chicken.
It also looks like fucking Garbo. There's eggs and various types of poultry flying all over the place. And the camera is too drunk to fuck, but ultimately it's a fucking tagged on beat 'em up mode, dude. That shallow, definitely, and the enemies really only differ slightly in their HP amounts or in how aggressive they are, but something about running into about a dozen dudes from a yard away, revving up your engines and puckering up your pooper, drop kicking in like the fabulous boy door ram what you are, ragdolling them all across the stage in blissful unison as acres of chickens sprout from their boy holes is really quite a lot of fun. It has a lot of the more satisfying elements the main game sadly lacks at times. Anyway, besides the non-consensual mode, it offers the usual time attack mode and team battles, but it doesn't seem to have any of the super sneaky cheeky secret unlockables of yore. You gain new characters as you beat the arcade mode, sure, but in Tekken 1, 2, and 3, there were always a few dudes who were acquirable through other means. Like, actually putting in the effort to beat the fucking Force mode, for instance, winning the Gradius minigame or going through the arcade mode once without getting a continue. Well, that shit was fucking neat, fam! As it made the game seem a lot bigger than it in all actuality was. And this game doesn't do that, which is a bit of a shame. Elevators, big business, shopping malls, sleek cars, assholes, and 90s fuckboy sensibilities. These are the elements that make up Tekken 4's aesthetic, and I bloody love it. I've tried writing entire videos about this before. Sexy stages, an opinion piece or two, and even a half-ass attempt at a review back in 2013. Never quite knew how to convey its awesome though. Like, how do you describe something that's simply cool to you without saying, yeah, it's pretty cool? Well, the lighter and somewhat slower gameplay does actually fit the game's mood. Not sure if that's entirely deliberate, but I can't help but get a wee bit giddy over neat contextual quirks like that. To convey an art style or mood with sound and visuals is one thing, but to have the actual game play into this as well with its general design and kinesthetics is something else entirely. Shit's hard to pull off, let alone balance, and clearly they didn't quite nail that balance here as people weren't able to forgive the game's slowness over its artistic merit. But at least it's a neat attempt at an atmospheric piece/fighting game hybrid thing. Hell, it even has dynamic fucking music, which works impressively well. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard it pull off this effectively. How it works is that there's 3 stages of each and every song. One for during combat, kinda subdued, one where it goes full fuck the moment you land the finishing blow, and a third form which is a more upbeat version of what played before during the last round. I'd wager that most people probably won't even notice this, but it makes winning a fight so much more satisfying than it ever was in prior titles. But sadly, the pro crowd won't really give a shit, as for them it still won't make up for the fact that it changed what made the series work as a competitive game to begin with. Though overall, I certainly wouldn't say that it's a bad game, and the music and the art style are cool, the story is neat, and the game is still fun for the most part. Just not as good as the others, but what can you do? I mean... You could play one of those then, but yeah, okay, fuck this game.